Welcome to this episode of Bias Hacking for Conversation Designers, the Vocalime series exploring how different kinds of cognitive biases interact with the work of conversation designers and offering insights on how to mitigate them. Today, we'll be delving into so-called anchoring bias. Starting from what is anchoring bias? So according to the Decision Lab's definition, anchoring bias is the tendency we have as humans to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we're given about a topic. So generally, when we are setting plans or making estimates about something, we interpret newer information from the reference points of our anchor instead of seeing it completely objectively. This can skew our judgment and prevent us from updating our plans or predictions as much as we should. Let's consider this example. You're shopping for a present for your friend, and you have set for yourself a budget of $100. The first item you see is a necklace. It looked great, and you think your friend might like it, actually. But when you look at the price tag, you realize that it costs $200. That's way over your $100 budget, so you put it back. You keep browsing the shop, and after some research, you finally see some really cute earrings. Those would work too. So you look at their price tag, and you see they're $150. Okay, you think it's still more than your initial budget, but hey, it's cheaper than the necklace. Let's break down what happened here. The first piece of information you've registered on jewelry pricing was $200. This information constitutes your anchor. So now you're judging the price tag for another piece of jewelry against that anchor price. That's why 150 now seems like a bargain compared to 200, even though that's not what you budgeted for initially. But how does this all relate to conversation design? Let's bias hack this. A little disclaimer before we get started. It's likely not possible to completely avoid anchoring bias given how ubiquitous and powerful it is. Like all cognitive biases, anchoring bias happens subconsciously. So when one isn't aware of something is happening, it's really difficult to interrupt it. This video is meant more as a thought exercise than a be-all, end-all solution to a cognitive process that is effectively entrenched in our brains. Now that that's out of the way, let's get started. In our introduction video to the bias hacking series, we saw how bias interact with the work of conversation designers in two ways. Bias guide and sometimes cloud the conversation designer's own judgment, leading them to make assumptions. But also, bias influence the users of the interface the conversation designer designs. Today, we'll try to bring awareness to the twofold impact of anchoring bias on the work of conversation designers and how to work around it. Or, as we like to say it, bias hack it. First strategy is to always be open. Knowing that you might be assuming something about your target or your use case is the first necessary step to creating a useful and smooth experience. As banal as it sounds, listening to what others have to say and being open to admitting you're wrong is already a great starting point. Related to this, but different, is the second point. After entering a project with an open mind, you also need to stay flexible throughout the process. So don't anchor yourself to your initial idea of how things will go down, and expect to learn things from the process and to adapt your trajectory as it rolls out. Finally, and most importantly, always be guided by research. We know, duh, but research truly is your biggest friend to suppress bias tendencies and effectively substituting the anchoring info that is informing your decisions with real life data. Now let's consider the other side to anchoring bias, meaning how can anchoring bias affect the user you're designing for and how to account for these cognitive processes in your design. First thing to consider is that users will likely benchmark their current experience they're having with your bot against the traditional experience they're used to having in that domain. Let's make this more concrete considering an example. Take the case of a chatbot appearing on the website of an e-commerce. The experience of chatting with it could easily remind the users of the interaction they're used to having with a shop assistant. So as a designer, ask yourself, how is this experience I'm designing going to be distinctively superior to that? But also, what are familiar things maybe from the traditional experience I can replicate in the conversation design to make the new interface feel less foreign and more familiar to the user? The second tip is to be aware of the order in which you present options. Not only will users be paying more attention to the first items you introduce, they will also judge the latter option relying on the first ones as meter of comparison. Thus, in some cases, it can be wiser to present the less desirable ones first before introducing the more naturally appealing ones. Finally, research has proved time and time again that anchoring bias has a strong effect on the way we understand and assess prices, particularly of goods we are really unfamiliar with. So, for sales purposes, it can help to set a higher anchor price and offer a discount later on. These are just a few situations where anchoring bias can impact our work as conversation designers. Let us know if you can think of any other examples, and in the meantime, check out our other videos of the series, Bias Hacking for Conversation Designers. Bye, or should I say bias for now.